We have a ton of news about the fourth stimulus check, Social Security benefits, SSI and SSDI. Continue watching this video because you don't want to miss this important stimulus news, folks. Here it is. There are major changes to Medicare and SNAP that may go into effect this year. Joe Biden has unveiled his new plan that's going to ease health expenses for the millions of people. Even as inflation continues to rise, people are still facing these effects. Medicare is the main source of health insurance and its coverage of 65 million people, a major source of revenue for hospitals, other healthcare providers, and health insurance that offer Medicare Advantage plans. Over the years, though, policy lawmakers have already debated major changes to this, and Medicare driven by concerns about solvency, sustainability, and affordability, propelled by an aging population and system-wide increase in healthcare spending, as well as the program's contributions to federal budget deficits and debt. Joe Biden is currently proposing a tax increase for people who make more than $400,000 to extend the solvency for another 25 years. Biden's also allowed a proposed bill allowing Medicare to negotiate prices for more types of prescriptions and using that savings from that to preserve the program. This Inflation Reduction Act that Biden signed last year allowed the program to negotiate prices for some prescriptions. Biden even wrote that lowering prescription prices while extending Medicare's solvency makes a lot more sense than cutting benefits. These are common sense changes that I'm confident an overwhelming majority of Americans support, and discussions about Medicare cuts are heating up, partly based on two announcements by the Centers of Medicare and Medicaid Services. Related to Medicare Advantage, though, Medicare Advantage is the private plan alternative to traditional Medicare that now provides plans and Medicare coverage to allow approximately half of the beneficiaries to get it. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services estimates that it will cost over $4.5 billion over the next decade by applying the new changes to plans. Many people don't agree with these changes, and some are even having controversies about this. But signs are emerging that medical inflation is back, as demand for non-crisis related health services are beginning to rise. It's used the Medicare Advantage to adjust the capitalized payments the federal government makes to cover expected medical costs of enrollees. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services estimates it will collect about $4.5 billion over the next decade, raising about 2% annually every single time. I also want to say that according to CNN, food banks and programs help millions of people find food, groceries in their communities every day. Since the crisis started, SNAP recipients have been receiving an additional payment in the second half of the month, known as the emergency allotment. The emergency allotment ended back in February, and starting this month, SNAP recipients are now only receiving their one regular payment. Currently, the Commodity Supplemental Food Program provides assistance for low-income seniors with a monthly package of USDA commodities. There is also a Child and Adult Care Food Program. It provides nutritious meals, snacks to children and adults in designated child and adult care centers. On a state level, the governor of Pennsylvania is proposing a $16 million investment into this program, so it should help some people out with stimulus cash. That's, folks, what we need in America right now.
Save families money, it also lowers the deficit by hundreds of billions of dollars. Republicans like to talk about cutting the debt, but Democrats are the ones actually getting it done. Unlike Republicans, the president is also asking the richest of the rich to pay a little more of their fair share in taxes, so that tens of millions of Americans will not see their Medicare benefits wither away in a few years. Under the president's plan, Medicare would remain solvent well beyond 2050. Isn't that great? Medicare, which we've always worried about, which is so important to tens of millions of Americans, would stay solvent till 2050. Republicans, of course, want to go the other way. Instead of cutting taxes for the middle class, their priority is tax cuts for billionaires and large corporations. Now, I have no problem with those at the very top. God bless them. They're doing just fine. But I think most Americans agree that CEOs should never have a lower tax burden than nurses, teachers, cab drivers, firefighters, police officers. If my friends on the other side want to call that outlandish or extreme, they can go right ahead. But I warn them they'll be at odds with the vast majority of Americans. Finally, the president's plan will build on what Democrats accomplished last year to lower the cost of prescription drugs. For the first time ever, Medicare now has the authority to negotiate the price of certain drugs, saving taxpayers billions of dollars. But the president is right to push further, expanding the list of drugs whose prices Medicare can negotiate. So let's run through the list one more time. The president's plan is going to continue lowering the cost of prescription drugs. He's going to ensure that Medicare remains solvent beyond 2050 without cutting a penny in benefits. He's going to ask the wealthy to pay just a little more in their fair share of taxes without raising taxes on anyone making less than $400,000 a year.
They need to fill, and it would be a terrible mistake for higher education to think, oh, we can just raise tuition costs and all because the government will take care of that. That's not going to happen. I suspect this is a one-time thing. And higher education, you asked the perfect question. Higher education has got to look itself in the eye.
And expanded Medicare benefits. That failed after Manchin said it would be too costly, though the law is considerably smaller than their initial ambitions. Biden and Democrats calling the legislation a once-in-a-generation investment in addressing the long-term effects of climate change. Another $64 billion will help 13 million people pay premiums over the next 3 years for privately bought health insurance under the Affordable Care Act. Medicare will gain the power to negotiate its costs for pharmaceuticals initially in 2026 for only 10 prescriptions. Medicare beneficiaries' out-of-pocket prescription costs would be limited to $2,000 annually starting in 2025. In the beginning of next year, would pay no more than $35 a month for insulin. Manchin also told reporters that the Inflation Reduction Act will immediately temper inflation, telling reporters that the necessary investments needed to bring down prices would take some time. Manchin said the market is anticipating the investments that will be made with the passing of the bill. Utility prices, for instance, will come down as the U.S. becomes more energy dependent. And Manchin told reporters, I think if you're going to wait for the Federal Reserve to raise rates, discourage you from buying anything that's going to take care of our inflation. That's not how you take care of inflation. That's not how you take care of inflation. Ask people to pour large sums of money into putting solar panels on the roof, buying an electric vehicle. Manchin said that will be a 10-year process. It's not going to be overnight, and they have incentives to do that and to help them. The measure is paid by new taxes on large companies and stepped up IRS enforcement on wealthy individuals. Folks, low-income households are finally now eligible to receive a fourth stimulus check. These new stimulus payments are worth up to $5,000. Americans in some parts of the country are getting extra cash payments to help offset blistering inflation, with at least 19 states and one city offering financial relief to residents grappling with higher food prices, gas, and rent. And although consumer prices cooled slightly in July, they still rose 8.5% last month from a year ago, near a 4-decade high and more than quadruple the Federal Reserve's target of 2%. Here's what one mayor, governors, and state lawmakers are offering help to taxpayers in the states and cities. Now, Alaska Senate recently approved a budget that includes sending Alaska stimulus checks to residents. The Senate approved a budget even as the state faces a revenue windfall due to high oil prices. The Alaska Senate approved a state spending package that includes provision to send Alaska stimulus checks to residents. The $5,500 payment includes $4,200 as dividend payment, as well as $1,300 in energy relief checks. According to the